Okay, so there are 4 letters that bring views to this channel. BMAD. Every time I test this framework, the video gets so many views. And every time the framework eats my weekend. The first attempt took 8 hours for a landing page. The second one took 7 hours for our beloved tuna cannon game. And the comments still said I did it wrong. So I told myself I'm done poking that corpse. Well, apparently they shipped something called BMad Loop, and it's meant to run everything autonomously. Minimal human in the loop, no babysitting. The ceremony framework of all things going autonomous. Guess I'm going back. Now credit where credit is due. BMad was one of the very first SDD frameworks. Before spec-driven development was even a term, BMad was already doing it. And it made persona roleplay mainstream. The PM agent, the architect, the developer, separate characters, each one with its own job. Academic frameworks tried personas first, but BMad puts them in everyone's editor. When I first heard about the approach, it felt revolutionary. Do a lot of planning before you write code. It seems so smart that I expected the final result to be impeccable from the first try. Eventually, I was very disappointed. But the approach itself inspired other frameworks, and those became leaner and worked better. And the context matters. BMad started back when, in the creator's own words, Sonnet 3.5 was the state of the art. All that ceremony existed because those models needed babysitting. The questions, the documents, the approval gates, they weren't slow, they were dim and forgetful. Even a year later, in my own first test, the model needed constant hand-holding. So a human checkpoint after every step made sense. The creator says as much as himself. Their livestream calls that era the Stone Age of AI. I won't retell the previous failures, both videos are on the channel. Short version, the full method took me 8 hours for a landing page, and V6 took 7 hours for our tuna cannon game. Green checkmarks everywhere, broken code in the browser. Plan mode built the same game in under 15 minutes. One discovery from that video matters here. BMad's YOLO mode ran a single step and stopped. So I added instructions to Claude.mt, do not stop, keep going until the story is done. And that worked. Stories ran to completion on their own. Basically, I duct taped an autonomous loop on top of BMad. Keep that in mind, because that is, more or less, what they shipped as a product. Okay, so what exactly did they ship? The thing is called BMad Loop, and the pitch is one sentence. A deterministic Python-based unattended dev loop with adversarial review. You give it a pile of stories, and it implements them one by one. The planning is still on you, the spec, the epics, the stories. The loop starts where the stories end. No approval between steps, no human pasting the next command. The command paster has been automated, that was my job. First interesting detail, BMad Loop wasn't built by the BMad creator. It came from Paul, a community contributor. He's been around the project since the early versions, mostly on the game dev side, and his origin story sounds familiar. He got tired of running code review, switching between Claude and Codex, patching things by hand. So he built, in his words, essentially this Ralph loop on top of BMad specs. First there was a prototype called the BMad Automator. It was never officially released, but people used it anyway and liked it. So it grew into a proper product. Second detail, this is not a skill or a prompt. It's a separate repo, and the orchestrator is actual Python code. Here's how a run works. BMad generates a stories file during planning as usual. Then BMad Loops picks the next story and launches your coding CLI in a tmux window. Inside that window, a worker skill plans the story, implements it, and reviews it. The review is 4 layers, and the reviewers are blinded. They don't see each other's findings. When the worker is done, it writes status done into that story's front matter. The Python side pulls that file and verifies the result. The diff is not empty, the commit matches, your tests and your linter actually pass. Then it squash commits and picks the next story. Repeat until the epic is done. And it's model agnostic. 6 adapters right now. Claude Code, Codex, Gemini, Copilot, Anti-Gravity and Open Code. So you can mix them. The default mode runs one epic at a time. The intended use case is you kick it off and go to bed. There is a TUI to watch the run, and everything works headless from the command line too. When something goes really wrong, the run pauses and escalates. You hit one key and it spawns a resolve agent that explains what happened and helps you decide. Then the loop resumes. That's the pitch, anyway. One more piece actually like on paper, the deferred work engine. When a story turns out too big for one session, the loop doesn't just choke on it. It asks whether the rest of the epic can continue without part C, and if yes, part C goes into a deferred work log. A flaky test found during review gets deferred too, with a note to find the root cause later. That's the kind of judgment call I'd normally make myself between stories. Now, some numbers. BMad method, the main repo, sits at over 50,000 stars. BMad Loop has like 60. Total. The only video about it is the creator's own livestream. So this is very early. 21 releases in 5 weeks. Almost nobody has tried it yet, and whatever I show you today may look different next month. Before I run any of it, a word from the sponsor of this video, Lessie AI. A problem I keep running into. Building an app is the easy part now. You've seen the graycut in my other videos, mostly built by agents. The hard part comes after, finding the people who will actually use it. That's the division of labor here. Claude Code builds the product. Lessie finds the people who might want it. Lessie is a people search tool, and it works the same way as everything else in this video. A skill you drop into Claude Code. Their setup gives you a single command, npm skills add LessieAI lessie-skill. You paste it, restart Claude Code, and the skill appears in the list. From there, you describe who you're looking for in plain English. This also happened to be my first session with Opus 5. The model has been out for about 2 hours, and the first thing I asked it to do was track down strangers' email addresses. I asked for YouTube creators who edit their own videos. One tip, be specific. The first generic query under-delivered. Once I narrowed it down, the region and the niche, it landed. Close to 30 creators on target emails attached. And it confirms the cost before spending anything, as search is 20 credits and email is 3. So I have a list of contacts. At this point I can keep talking in the same chat and ask Lessie to write personalized emails based on each person's background, so I can invite them to try the tool I built and start getting real conversations going. And I now understand exactly how these people find me and send those automated collab requests. The link is in the description if you want to try it. Code TGC30 gets you 30% off. Now back to the loop. Quick context on loops in general, because the term is everywhere right now. The idea is simple. Instead of chatting with an agent, you give it a goal and let it run until the goal is reached. The most primitive version is the Ralph loop, a while true in Bash that feeds the same prompt to the agent over and over. Sounds dumb, works surprisingly often. Then the harnesses productized it. Codex introduced the goal command. You define a goal and it goes fully autonomous until the goal is achieved. Claude Code picks up the same feature later. The important part in all of this is completion condition. The loop needs a machine-checkable way to know it's done. Tests pass, the task list is empty, a status field says so. Otherwise, it either stops too early or runs forever, burning tokens. So BMad is not inventing something exotic here. The whole industry is converging on loops. The difference is what fits their loop, the specs and stories. Okay, enough theory. I'm going to run BMad Loop on the graycut, my AI editing app from the previous videos. Two features are in the backlog. First, script-free editing. Right now the app cuts a recording against a script, and I want it to handle impromptu talks. No script at all, but it still has to find the bad takes and the dead silences. Second, ElevenLabs transcription. I saw another YouTuber doing a similar workflow with the ElevenLabs API instead of transcribing locally. So I want the API key in settings and the switch to pick the transcriber. Two real features, well-defined, decent size. Exactly the kind of stories this loop should devour. Okay, so installing BMad method 6.10.0, and the loop is right there in the installer picker. Natively supported now, nothing extra to clone. I picked Claude Code and Codex because I had tokens to burn on both today. Then the two-stage thing. The installer tells you to finish the setup from inside your agent. There is a BMad Loop setup skill, and until you run it, nothing is wired. And the first discrepancy showed up in about a minute. The skill describes a YAML config. The project uses toml. Then it turned out the copy of that skill sitting in my project was stale, it predated their own redesign. Opus caught it and corrected itself mid-run. That's on a fresh install out of the box. But again, this is 0.9.0. Things like that are fine to happen. After that, the orchestrator installed clean. Hooks registered with both CLIs. One thing worth noting, both of them need a manual trust click once. If you skip it, a spawned session just reads as a timeout. Now the brownfield part. The graycut already exists, so BMad wants to document it first. BMad document project deep scan. It says 10 to 30 minutes. Took like 15. 12 files, about 1800 lines of markdown. Those docs are pretty decent, I'd say. I'll probably use them outside BMad too. And this is where I remembered what BMad actually feels like. Read a wall of text, press C. Read the next wall, press C. I guess it's deliberate, the human in the loop, so you keep up with what's going on. I just wanted the loop, then BMad spec. I described the two features in plain English, rambling, and it came back with 8 questions. Good questions. One of my answers changed the shape of the whole feature, and I only caught it because it told me. Then epics. 4 of them, and I merged them down to 3. 34 requirements, 17 stories. And then BMad Loop validate, which crashes. Git work tree is not clean. Well, of course it's not clean, you just generated 100 markdown files. So commit everything, run it again. Now the verify commands are missing from policy.toml, fix those, run it again. By the time I could actually start the loop, 2 hours were gone. BMad Loop run, and the terminal goes quiet. No logs, nothing scrolling, the orchestrator spawns Claude somewhere off the screen and sits there. You get a notification when it wants you and a file called attention.md. That's the whole interface. There's a second command though, BMad Loop TUI. That one is the actual dashboard and it should probably be the default. Story status, a tokens counter, the worker's terminal live. First escalation came about a minute in. Branch convention mismatch, which was my config. But the stop reason wasn't in the attention file. To find out why it stopped, I had to go read the implementation artifacts myself. Then I made it worse. There are 2 commands, resume and resolve, and I picked the wrong one. The loop went through crash recovery and deleted about an hour of its own work. Claude restored it. My mistake, but escalated is a terminal state with 1 exit and no way to cancel a story. 2 similar verbs, where one of them is your work, is a sharp edge. The review layer is the part I liked. Subagent called Blind Hunter and Edge Case Hunter go at the diff independently and the findings were real. I was genuinely impressed. Right up until I realized one review takes over an hour to finish. Still pretty good though. Story 1.3 escalated on one of those reviews and it was a real design gap in my own app. None of my 21 JSON RPC method returned a word-level transcript. Correct call. I wouldn't have caught that today. And resolve spawns a Claude session that asks you a question. Every time the recommended default was the answer I'd have given. So this could be automated. I started at 2 in the afternoon. At 8 it was still going, epic 1, story 3. Not a single story got through without a critical escalation. What I want is a YOLO mode. Same idea as dangerously skip permissions except for decisions. Until that exists, I've got a workaround in mind. A tmux pane with Fable on top, watching the loop answering escalations, keeping it alive overnight. While the loop is chewing on a story, one thing. I keep testing these frameworks so you don't have to waste your own weekends on them. If that's useful, subscribe. And if you try BMad Loop yourself, join the Discord and tell me how it went. Link in the description. Before the verdict, one thing I noticed in the sources. And by I noticed, I mean an agent read the whole repo and chewed it out for me, while I sat back petting the cat on my lap. I also ran their test suite, 2,577 tests passed. and there is more test code than source code in that repo, but not a single test ever runs an actual LLM. The worker that implements your stories is about 500 lines of prose in a skill, and no code validates its state machine. So the determinism is one-sided. Python reads the status field deterministically, but it's still the model that writes status down. The shell is engineering, the core is probabilistic. Remember my v6 run, green checkmarks on every story, that code in the browser. The model saying done was exactly the part that lied. Now that same signal drives an unattended loop. That's the one question that matters here. So did it finish? No. 6 hours in, Epic 1, Story 3, still going. Neither feature shipped. And the thesis I set up, does the model write done over the broken code? I can't answer it. I never got to the point where I could run the app and test the feature. I had 1 day for this experiment and the loop ate it. At some point, when I've got Fable tokens to spare, I'll just hand it the goal and leave it running overnight. It'll grind through the rough spots on its own, which is what a loop is supposed to do. Here is what the day cost. 85 million tokens. At Opus 5 API rates, that's about $74. I didn't pay it, it ran on my subscription, and roughly a third of it went on BMad ceremony before the loop even started. Would plain code have done these two features faster? I think yes. And I say that as someone who likes specs. The stories were good, the review agents were good, the docs it generated I'm keeping. But the wrapper around all that asked me for decision every 20 minutes. I was never more than one room away from the terminal. One caveat on all of that. I ran this on Opus 5 at high effort, and Opus 5 behaves differently from what I'm used to. Anthropic's own prompting guide for it says to strip out legacy harness scaffolding because the model already verifies its own work. Give it room to make its own calls, which is a little awkward here. A framework that hands the model a story template, a state machine, and 4 layers of review might be exactly the wrong shape for this particular model. It's early, we'll find out soon enough. Which brings me to what I think this actually is right now. The orchestrator is deterministic enough to stop and not smart enough to continue. Every stop it made was correct. The branch config, the API gap, even my own bad command. It's just that stops correctly and runs unattended are different products. That's fixable. This is 0.9.0, the loop is weeks old, and everything I had was a rough edge rather than a wrong idea. Somebody wires a second model into the escalation seed and this thing runs overnight. It might be me, which would be funny, because last time around I got the same result with one line in CloudMD. So the verdict from my v6 video stands softened. BMad still charges you a ceremony tax upfront. The specs and stories are worth something, and now there's a machine that eats them. I'd wait for 1.0. So, BMad Loop. The interview didn't go anywhere, and I have to admit that interviews is still the best part of BMad. Those 8 questions were worth more than most of what followed. What changed is the part after them. In theory, I kick off the epic and walk away. In practice, you saw how far that got me. Knowing this project's release pace, half of this video will be outdated by next month. We've got what we've got. If you want to see the previous chapter, that video is right here. BMad against plain plan mode. 7 hours against like 15 minutes. Thanks for watching.